Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to have some folks jumping on for a bit here. I wanted to go ahead and get started so that we stay on time. My name is Danielle. I am the founder of Tackle What's Next. Thank you guys so much for being here, taking time out of your Thursday afternoon for this discussion. You guys can stay on mute. If your cameras are off, feel free to leave them that way. I am happy to introduce two members of our Making Sports More Equitable Coalition, Michelle Mays and Tiffany Scott, who are going to introduce today's event. Michelle?
Thank you, Danielle. I'm Michelle Mays, co-founder of Champions for Philanthropy. Before we start, we'd first like to introduce and thank the members of our Making Sports More Equitable Coalition for tonight's event. Our 7 organizations have partnered together to bring these conversations to the sports industry. We've made a commitment to provide conversation and resources to inspire action to make our own industry more equitable. The 7 organizations include Pivot, Elite 8 Marketing, Champions for Philanthropy, Ambi Group, Philanthropy Playmakers, Tackle What's Next, and Relate Social Capital. The goal of this coalition is to share opportunities and insights to support our industry in creating real and lasting change toward equity. We focus on raising awareness of the problem, the numbers behind it, and personal stories that can allow all draw attention to possible solutions. Through small group conversations following our panel of expert discussion, we aim to offer the opportunity to have a dialogue on how to implement real change throughout the sports industry, but more specifically within your own organization and within your own circles. This conversation is the first of several we will host throughout this year on topics to inspire and motivate real and sustainable change. Thank you to everyone on screen for their work to make today happen. Now I'd like to introduce Tiffany Scott, who will introduce our conversation.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Tiffany Scott. I'm the founder of Elite 8 Marketing. Today's panel will tackle how organizations can reshape their talent pipelines to better reflect the sports industry and provide more inclusivity and diversity. This discussion will analyze current pipelines and provide thoughts on areas for improvement and how to continue to push in the right direction of equality and equity. Additionally, this conversation will explore inclusivity and diversity of talent pipelines and how they play a role in the overall development of equity. We hope you will leave with a better understanding of what you can do to support equity and inclusion in your respective roles and organizations. One point we want to make sure that we highlight: talent pipelines is not the solution to bringing equity and inclusion into the workplace, but it's definitely a piece of the puzzle. Please ensure you stay on mute during the conversation so that we do not interrupt the panel. And after the conversations, we'll move into Q&A, where you'll have the opportunity to ask questions to our speakers. So get ready with your questions to ask. And now we would like to introduce our panelists for today's conversation, starting with our moderator, Corinne Millian. Corinne is the co-founder and executive director of the Winning Edge Leadership Academy. Next, we have Vincent Pearson, who is the CEO and principal strategist for VSP Diversity Solutions. We have Ashley Howard, head coach for LaSalle University's men's basketball team. And last but certainly not least, we have Tania Rivers, Chief Human Resources Officer of Curio Wellness. Thank you all so much for being here and sharing your experiences and insights. And now we'll turn things over to Corinne to get the conversation started.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, this coalition, for creating this platform for the ability to have this very important question. You all sounded so serious, but I want to make sure that everybody knows that this is going to be a casual conversation. This is going to be a space where we are not just learning from the panelists here, but we're learning from each other. And as with any conversation that I'm a part of, I like to start off with the same question for our panelists. I would like for you to start off with, who are you, what do you do, and why? And so we'll start with Vince.
All right, thank you, Corinne. First of all, I'm Corinne's homeboy, so that's kind of my claim to fame and why I'm here. No, my name is Vince Pearson. I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia. I've lived in Tampa, Florida, New York City, and now I'm back in Jacksonville, Florida. I run my own consultancy working with clients in the education, sports, and media space, building out diversity and inclusion strategies. I also coach and provide workshops with education in D&I. But I think the more important piece there is the strategy. And I'm excited to have this conversation. I do have to give a shout out to Minorities in Sports. That's an organization that could absolutely help expand your pipeline. And this is their t-shirt. It says, yes, I work in sports. No, I can't get you tickets. But we can dig more into that later in the conversation. Thanks, Corinne.
Awesome. Ashley, who are you? What do you do and why?
Ashley Howard here, head men's basketball coach at LaSalle University. I coach because I love helping people, and coaching in college basketball gives me the opportunity to provide access to education, but also to provide access to a better life once my players' careers are over. So, I just love having the opportunity to make an impact on the lives of young people, and the game of basketball has given me that chance.
I love it. As a basketball junkie myself, anytime I can have a conversation with a basketball coach, I'm in heaven. Thank you. Tania, I've been more excited to have this conversation. I'm not trying to gas you up, but.
Please don't do that, because I don't want to inflate anyone just in case I don't show up and show out today.
You got it. Who are you? What do you do and why?
Sure. So my name is Tania Rivers. Most people call me T, so you can feel free to use that as well.
We're working on it.
Okay. I know Corinne doesn't like nicknames, but for those of you who do, feel free to call me T. I've been in HR for about 25 years. And I tell you, like, one of the things that's important to me, and I would say what I'm passionate about, is really being able to create amazing cultures and workplaces where employees can be their most authentic selves while feeling valued and appreciated. So that's a lot, but it's important. And I think that really speaks to who I am.
Awesome. So now we have set the tone with who we are and why we have been asked to have this conversation. Let's dive into why this conversation is important. I'm an analytics person. I love research. I read way more than I should, but it definitely provides context to this conversation. And in reading a recent study, and we don't even have to read studies to know that the demographics of this country are shifting. The majority of this country in 20 years will look very different than it is now, with many people of color stepping into the workforce. And with knowing that, I want to start with T. I'm gonna try it.
All right.
We gonna see.
You can do anything once. So let's start with one T and we'll work our way up from there. It's fine.
Perfect. So I want to start off with you, T. Have you seen things get better, worse, or stay the same for diverse talent getting into the industry?
Yeah, I've definitely seen a trend where things are getting better. I think that, especially I could speak for like from the NBA, they really take it seriously. Shout out to Youre Stewart, who's the chief diversity officer of the NBA. He does an amazing job. And I think he kind of is the catalyst to help the other NBA teams be more diverse. So I'm definitely seeing an uptick with really seeing a commitment to D&I and having more people of color in the workforce. Like, is there an opportunity to always do better? It's like, yeah, it's like once you get that talent, then what do you do with it to really create a platform so that employees can grow within an organization? So yes, I'm seeing an uptick with, things being better, but there's always room for improvement for sure.
Ash, what do your players call you? What do your players call you?
They call me Coach Ash.
All right, Coach, but on a good day, they may say Coach Ashy, but we're not gonna go there, right?
No, we won't go there.
Okay. But Ash, you are someone that has gone through the coaching ranks and seen different and been a part of different development programs. So as you've been in the industry of coaching and college athletics, what has been your experience in seeing it either getting better, worse, or staying the same?
Well, I think it fluctuates, right? I think you have a stretch where, we see that, there's a huge need for more minorities in positions of power in the athletic space. And then, it's addressed by certain, situations, whether it's, Kevin Ollie winning a national championship at UConn. So now it becomes the cool thing to hire a young minority head coach, right? But I think the most important thing is that, and I think Tania spoke to it, is when we get minorities in positions of influence, that they're prepared to take advantage of their opportunities, right? So I think the one thing that I've seen as of late is just more opportunities for professional development, more of a connection amongst minority coaches and administrators in that space, where guys are more willing to share their stories and experiences, so that now we can help the next guy be more prepared for when he gets his opportunity.
I love that. And I love that you use Coach Ollie as an example, because I think he's both sides of the coin, right? He
Yep.
wins the national championship at UConn. And then it seems from the outside looking in, it didn't take much for them to drop him too. And we're seeing that across most leagues and most sports, where for minority coaches, you get one opportunity and then you struggle to get back in, whereas other coaches may bounce around. I mean, as a Tennessee fan, Derek Dooley and Lane Kiffin have more opportunities to coach than T. Martin did, right? So that's my Tennessee shout out, because we need to do better. But so I love that you brought that example. And I want to get to you, Vince, on with your strategy consultation and your experience with minor league baseball and their fields program. Once they're getting in the building, how have you seen that professional development Ash talked about, and organizations being able to retain talent? And have you seen that get better, worse, or stay the same?
A little bit of me feels like that question is a setup, because we've absolutely gotten better. There's no denying that improvement has taken place, decade over decade, much less generation after generation. I think one of the areas where we just can't fool ourselves and rest on the laurels of getting better when the gap to begin with was so wide. We can't just get better. We have to correct for. And I think that's where organizations have to see themselves in this conversation a bit more, because we often see ourselves as separate from the problem. And so whatever we can do to support the problem, we deserve medals for, right? But if we see ourselves as part of the problem, then we can be more intentional about how we go about correcting that problem, because it's not just a thing we tend to when we have time. It's a thing that we're partly responsible for. So I say all that to say we've absolutely gotten better. But there still is so much room for improvement, specifically on the development side. I think that is something that when folks enter the workplace starts to happen in ways that aren't so structured. And so access to the room doesn't necessarily mean access to the top, or access to the information you need to move up. And so we have to look at how that access is distributed as well. I mean, that's where organizations can try to understand the structure of how people progress along in an organization and see where there might be exclusion.
So following up on that, what challenges or myths? I think they're myths, because sometimes we hear them and we're like, nah, you could do better than that. But what are you hearing from employers that you're working with or have dealt with when it comes to the lack of diversity in the industry?
Well, with respect to all of my clients who have me sign NDAs, I don't hear or discuss anything specific to what happens with them, right?
No.
But some of the other stuff that I've heard about, again, it really just kind of ladders back to how we see the problem. I think one of the biggest issue or challenge is that we expect, there's an expectation that movement starts to come once we recognize the issue and once we want to do better, but we're not intentional enough around how we're going to do better and how we're going to hold ourselves accountable to it. So I think it's just aligning our intentions with what we do next. Hopefully we'll start to see more intentional action. But I think the key here is to look at outcomes. Don't look at, I think things like the Rooney Rule are great. And if we go there in a conversation, then good, we probably should. But the Rooney Rule looks at the front end of a process. We also have to look at the back end and the outcomes. What do we actually produce with our policies, practices, policies, practices, and procedures? What do they actually produce? So it's looking at those outcomes and not being afraid to filter it by demographic, by race, by gender, by any other demographic we have available, and assessing the outcomes that way. So going back to how you opened up, we have to become analytic nerds with this stuff, and we usually have the data to be able to do that.
The receipts are there. And T, look at me.
Oh, star girl.
Listen, I'm getting it. You have been in a position to acquire talent, recruit talent, bring talent in, and you've come into a situation, to an organization where maybe they didn't have that diversity strategy yet, and you were put in place to kind of start that, especially with your current role. So before diving into the work that you're doing now, what were the myths or challenges that you were hearing from potential employers, maybe when they were scouting you and trying to bring you on, as to their lack of diversity in the organization?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Corinne. I think one of the things that I heard a lot, and I still hear, which is very frustrating to me, is that we can't find talent. Like, we want diverse candidates, they are out there, but we just can't find them. And that is just such an excuse. And I think I love what Vincent said about being intentional, because you have to be intentional. Like, you have to think about creative ways to recruit that you may, opposed to just pulling off applications from teamwork. Like, that's just not going to happen. Like, you got to get out there and hit the ground and find people. So I think that is one of the things that I hear often is we just can't find diverse candidates, and it's an excuse. And another thing that I see too is, again, Vincent brought up the Rooney Rule, but yeah, I've seen organizations solely make that commitment to having that diverse talent. But as soon as the diverse talent comes in, there's like almost like a funnel. The talent goes right back out. Is because we're not setting them up for success. We're pushing everyone into sales associate roles when not everyone is a salesman. It's the hardest job ever, I would feel at it, to be quite honest. And there's no other opportunity. So everyone kind of gets this bottleneck being forced into sales roles, and then there's nowhere else to go. And then you'll see the talent kind of trickle in and trickle out. So we just have to, again, you'll hear that word intentional come up. We have to be intentional about getting diverse talent, setting them up for success, and then really giving them, development opportunities to stay within an organization. That's something that we just have to make that commitment to do better with, for sure.
I call it the diversity gap, the gap between intention and action. And it's huge, and it's something that we cannot ignore anymore. And so you and Vince talked about the recruiting piece. And Ash, I want to ask you, as you were coming up in the ranks and getting ready for your next role, this is your first head coaching role. Mm-hmm. What was that experience like, and just getting the information to put yourself in a position to become a head coach?
Well, there was a lot of preparation involved. I was fortunate enough, I worked for a Black head coach, my first job. So he taught me a lot about, how to operate within that space. And then one of the things that he also did was he mentored me all along the way. And my employer before I got the LaSalle job, Jay Wright, everything he did with the intent of developing me into a head coach. So he gave me responsibilities while I was an assistant that prepared me, right? So most people don't know this, but like, he likes to go on vacation in the summertime. So you leave, he's like, all right, Ash, like, you're running workouts, you're organizing our recruiting schedule. You make sure when you have players that are, going to camps and doing certain things during the off season, agents, all those things, just organize all of these things so that when he comes back, I can just lay it out for him, right? So it gave me the opportunity to think about all of the different separate entities that go into running a program. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to be intentional with giving my assistants those same responsibilities so they're prepared, right? But the one thing I'll tell you is you're never fully prepared until you get in that seat, right? So there were a lot of things that, you know, I thought I had a handle on, but every situation is different. So, you know, each job, each organization you work for has different challenges, right? Some jobs may have more resources than others. So now you have to learn how to, you know, balance things out. You may be used to functioning one way, working for one organization, and then you get with another and you have to move in a different manner. So, you know, the most important thing, and I think this is why we're having a conversation, is to, you know, be able to identify people that have the same qualities that you have, you know, when you get into a leadership role. So, you know, one of the things that, you know, Coach did was he was very selective with the people that he brought into his organization. And he went through the vetting process, and he used his own resources to bring the right people in to make sure that they can do the job. So I think one of the biggest challenges once you get your head coaching job, or you are able to be put in a position of power or influence, is now hiring people that can do the job that you once did at a high level. So,
and I think that is, for me, that's a challenge. I think too often we are not seeing that happen. Once people of a diverse background, whatever that background is, that is different from the majority in your organization, either the assumption that it can only be me, right? That's not okay. We know how that is. Or I don't know if I have a voice at the table to bring others up. And so you all talked about the different challenges, and I want to go back to you, Ash. Did you ever feel that it was hard for you, like, to find those opportunities to become a head coach, or was it something that when you were ready, you felt that the opportunities availed themselves?
well, one of the things for me was I had to be a part of something that was absolutely extraordinary, that had never been done before, in order to even be considered for certain head coaching positions. You know what I mean? So I won 2 national championships as an assistant coach. And Tania is familiar with the situation. You know, I was involved with the recruitment of a lot of the players. And you know what? We could have lost 1 or 2 games. And you know what? People may not have looked at me as a qualified candidate. You know what I mean? So a lot of times in our industry, you know, as a minority, you have to do something exceptional, right? And I was fortunate enough to be a part of something exceptional. Now, does that mean that there are other coaches in other places that aren't as qualified as me? Absolutely not. But you know, I think the reality is, in our space, unless you achieve a certain amount of success, or you make it to the NCAA tournament where you're on that national platform, that national stage, it's hard to get people to even identify with who you are, right? There are a lot of people in my industry that are unbelievable coaches, unbelievable leaders, that, you know, are coaching in junior college, that are coaching, you know, high school, you know. So in my industry, it's really no difference between myself and a guy that's coaching junior college, other than the fact that I got the opportunity because I was a part of something that was, you know, remarkable. So, you know, and that's the thing that humbles me, because I recognize that. And, you know, I just want to give the people that work underneath me and the guys that I'm associated with just the opportunity to experience something special, because I understand the impact that it can have on your career in this industry.
My homeboy is radical. I like it. That's why he's here. And I want to hear his radical response to the statement of, you have to be exceptional at times to even get the opportunity, and what you feel, not just what you feel about that statement, but like, how does that make you feel as someone who's trying to get people to understand the strategy behind creating a more diverse and inclusive workplace?
Yeah, I think that that's part of, you know, and even with this conversation, we tend to talk about pipelines in a way that forces us to look at the entry levels of organizations. But we have to, we must get beyond that. And it's a great example that he shared. I think the comment that he made, I'm actually going to look back in the chat. He said, Ashley said, you're never fully prepared until you've been in the seat. And that is, I think that's always true. but it holds a different weight when there's a woman or a person of color who is trying to get in that seat. Because you have to prove that you're fully capable of the job before you get a chance to prove that you're fully capable of the job. I can't show you I can do it until I get a chance to do it. But they're at the other side of it, sometimes seemingly saying also that, well, I can't trust you to do it until you've done it. Where that bar isn't always the same for our peers who don't identify as women or person of color. It's on us as the people who are in position to take a look at that bar, ask questions about how the bar is set, to say, hey, is there a hint of difference here? Is someone being treated different because of a difference? Those can be tough questions, basic questions, but tough to sit with for ourselves, and certainly tough to have for decision makers. But I think that is uniquely true about leadership roles and how power is, not just how power is distributed, but how value is assessed. And I love that Ashley shared about Coach Wright empowering him to run the show in his absence, because that translates well to what sponsorship and empowerment can look like for us on the business side as well. It's one thing to hire a person of color or a woman and to say, to check your diversity box, is another to give them the development they need and then empower them to show that they can actually do these things, and then to sponsor them when it's time for them to move on. There's so much good to unpack from that, but I was definitely shaking in my seat hoping to get a chance to share. I think that's really key though. Sometimes you're never really prepared for the role. There's certainly factors we can look at: potential performance, the statements from previous employers, but sometimes you also have to be willing to say, this person seems like they can get the job done. I'm willing to bet they can. I see success in this person. So much of how power is distributed, especially in sports, is reliant on that feeling of the decision maker. And I think that's why we've seen historically so much exclusion, because that layer of difference may prevent a decision maker from seeing that value.
Unpacked so much. Thank you. T, earlier on, you mentioned we can get them in the door, but they're funneling out. They're being siloed into these roles. From someone who works at an organization, what's the responsibility or the role of an organization to retain that talent? Or if someone is sitting here and they are front office at the New York Rangers, I don't know, that's just hella random. I just said that. I don't know anything about the Rangers.
That was pretty random.
I'm sitting here in Atlanta talking about hockey in New York, but what role does an organization have so you've already done the work of getting them in the building. What's your role to keep them in the building?
Yeah, so then what's next, right? So I think a big part of it is really setting them up for training, for development opportunities, mentorship programs. Like when you come on board, like how do we connect them with someone and then provide them with learning paths and career paths? So it's a huge responsibility that the organizations have to really set them up for success, and not only doing that, but kind of paving the way for them. And don't just give them positions and expect them to say, okay, well, you're in this role, good luck. It's like, how do we develop you to do well in that position? And then how do we prepare you for what's next so that you can continue to grow within an organization? And I think that's a huge miss that I don't see, that I have been seeing at times within organizations that still creeps up today. Like we have to do a better job of really developing our staff and giving them the tools to be successful, not just, once they have this entry-level job, how do we motivate them to do what's next, or even for them to explore what's next? Like we have to take the time to develop them and mentor them.
You just said something that made me think of something so profound that it has escaped me now. So we know there are some people doing it right, but it takes an investment. Here's my profound thought. All that stuff you just said requires effort and an investment. It's not something that happens overnight. It costs money. It costs money to develop the courses or to pay the person or the strategist to come in and build that course. It takes money to provide that professional development, but there's a business case for that investment, right? So you are investing the $10,000 now to keep this person in the organization. You don't have to pay the $75,000 to retrain somebody and move them and bring them here and all that stuff. So I really appreciate you talking about you have to invest to keep them in the building. And one thing that I think when we were talking about the stats, and Vince mentioned the transparency. You mentioned when you were at HBSC, your calls with the NBA when we had our prep call, and how that really supported the efforts across the league. I think we've all seen the Tides reports and how the NBA continues to be at the top when it comes to diversity and diverse hiring. Why is the NBA so good at it? What makes them kind of separate from the rest of the leagues?
Yeah, I would say goes right back to that intention, right? Like they are very open and honest. Like each month we would have our meetings and we would look at our numbers. We have X amount of diverse hires in every single role, from entry-level positions all the way up to leadership roles. And we started to see a lot of different gaps, to the point where, when I gave a shout out to Oris earlier, it was because he really spent the time with each team to help them develop opportunities for people of color and for minorities. Not only that, I'm sure you guys are starting to see a trend of these diversity inclusion officers that are coming in to have these D&I strategies to be able to help, people of color and minorities in organizations. So I think why they are, I can say they probably are at a higher level than maybe you see some other sports teams, because they're very intentional. And then they're very authentic and transparent about it too. And not all organizations are willing to do that. Sometimes they want to hide the stats and pretend like they don't exist, but let's be real about it. Let's look at a report and show how diverse we really are. And again, not just diverse in those entry-level sales roles, but across the organizations, because I've seen in my experience, diverse employees in that entry-level sales associate role, and that's where it stops. How do we get them into C-suite positions? So you see people like me in C-suite roles of color and women. That's so important. So that's what the NBA is really good at. And I think that's what set them apart from other sports teams.
But Vince, it's not enough just to hire that DEI officer, is it? It's not enough just to bring in that strategist, is it?
No.
No.
The interesting part too is that I started my own consultancy around this time last year. And if we can remember where we were at this time last year, it's right before the pandemic started. Ahmaud Arbery wasn't yet in the news, nor was, and Breonna Taylor hadn't happened yet, and George Floyd hadn't happened yet. In the summer of last year, the DE&I roles started popping up like crazy. And I was a free agent, and it felt like, a kid in the candy store, because it's like, oh, wow, this company too. But I started interviewing and realizing that I needed to ask really hard questions, because those roles being set up for success means being empowered to disrupt systems of an organization, being empowered to actually come in and make a change. It might mean having a team, perhaps not at the onset, but to build in that direction. And look, you have to start where you are. So if you don't have one, then you should get someone who's full-time attending to this effort, but just do that with the understanding that that's the beginning. And if you stop there, a lot of your efforts are going to stop there too. I did want to point to something, because the business case was brought up, and I'm going to share a document in the chat for everyone, because the Citigroup just released a study, I think towards the end of last year, on the cost of racism and the cost of racial inequality in our country. And it's estimated that our country has lost 16 trillion over the last 20 years alone due to racial disparity in pay gaps and racialized experiences in education and home ownership.
Wow.
I share that because I'm tired of the business case. I'm tired of justifying why this is important. You can't attach a dollar sign bigger. If we divided that among the Fortune 500, which isn't fair to do, it'd be 32 billion each that they'd be responsible for. Let's say there were some small companies that took half of it. We're still looking at 16 billion per company. And that gets to, hitting our gross domestic product. I think they say 0.2% per year that we're missing out on, because we can't get out of our own way when it comes to racial discrimination and specifically racialized experiences in corporate America. I think I just wanted to put that there for the business case. Look, I know how important it is because it brings people to the table. But it's also very, very evident with a little bit of effort to identify why this is important, both from a culture and inclusion standpoint, and when we talk about our bottom lines.
So we are talking about the pipeline, and T, you mentioned that it's not just about the entry level. Coach Howard, you talk about, how your boss developed you and prepared you. So let's make sure we are wrapping up this conversation with some actionable items for the audience, and when we had our prep call, I wanted to break it down into 3 sections. Be early, so that's in the talent recruitment, that's attracting the right talent. Be intentional, we talked about that, closing that gap between intention and action, and be transparent. We'll start with you, Coach Ash. What is it you want people to leave from this conversation, whether you're in the front office, you are a player that you want to recruit, you are a parent of somebody who is getting ready to transition into that role, or you're a free agent looking to get in the industry? What are 3 things you want people to understand and start doing right now?
Well, the one thing is, your career is your career, and then you got to have a plan A, right? And your plan A is outside of your sport, like what are your interests, right? And then I think you have to identify what other interests you have and what you feel like you can excel at. And then you have to intentionally put yourself in situations where you can harness those skills, right? As a coach, it's my responsibility to help my student athletes identify those things and then put them in positions to get internships, put them in positions where they can gain access to not only opportunity, but for professional development in other areas outside of just basketball. There are a lot of talented young people in every athletic department across the country, right? I think, identifying student athletes is a great opportunity because student athletes are looking for internships. They're in the athletic space. They understand the ins and outs of the industry. So, being intentional on my end with getting my student athletes prepared for life after their sport, and for anyone who is looking for recruits to identify, athletic departments, identify any other coaching people that or other people in this industry, and ask them, do they have student athletes that are interested and that are looking for opportunities? Because there are a lot of talented young student athletes out there that are more than capable and are looking for opportunities.
T, what do people need to start doing right now? No more task force, no more no more conversations.
Yeah.
It's time to act.
Yeah, I would say the best thing that we can do for ourselves is network. We've heard that 1,000 times, but we are lazy networkers. Like, we want someone to drop a gift into our lap in order for us to give an opportunity. Like, how hard do we go at networking? Even if it's a connection a day on LinkedIn, or trying to, like, pre-COVID, get coffee with someone else. Like, how can I hop on a call or a Zoom call to have a conversation? Like, we have to stop being lazy. Okay, like, let's be real for a second. We have to stop waiting for these opportunities to kind of come our way, and we have to go after it and really work hard towards building our network. I can tell you, just in sports is all about connections, guys. Like, I think we all know that, right? They say it's a combination of what you know and who you know. No, it's who you know first. And then, so it's who you know that get into the door, and then the what you know that will keep you in the door. So don't be lazy, get out there and network, and know that you are responsible for yourself. Don't look at it. It's up to the organization to help me get to what's next. Like, you got to stay at it. And I think I always say too, like, don't be afraid to fail. Like, don't be afraid to go after something that you think, someone else may be qualified for, or you don't check every single box. Like, I've heard someone say, I'm not sure who the author is, but it's the setbacks in life that best prepare you for your comeback. So you got to be afraid to fail and be vulnerable to get to where you need to be.
Vince, what do people need to start doing right now to provide more equity in this space when it comes to talent pipeline?
I think that I'm going to try and be really specific. So
yes,
and forgive me, I'm going to directly speak to white people on the call right now. I'm going to ask that you look at your LinkedIn networks and look at who you're connected with. And if there aren't many people of color, then start changing that now. And the same, especially for the men, if you don't see very many professional women in your network, start changing that now. Do the same thing for the people that you mentor. Count the first 5-10 people that come to mind that you've mentored in the last 5 years. If there are no people of color, let's start to change that. And just keep going along that same process. Think about the last 10 people you hired. Think about the last 10 people you promoted. Think about the last 10 people you advocated for a role, or wrote a letter of recommendation for. If we're not starting to see more people of color or women represented in our own networks, it's gonna be really difficult for us to effectively and comprehensively move this along. We might be able to do it in silos. We may be able to do it in moments. It may happen with initiatives, but it will never become a part of how we operate until we think about it in every way that we operate. So that's my takeaway.
Well, yes, and that's a perfect transition to this selfless plug I'm about to make for the Winning Edge Leadership Academy. Because Ashley, you spoke about it, and the student athletes are incredible assets to any organization, and the Winning Edge, and we have a couple of our members. Vince is an advisory committee member. Ebony McHugh, she's on here. She's an advisory committee member. We have challenged organizations to rethink how to engage young talent. And we've created micro internships. So no football player can come to your organization for 3 months. That's not gonna happen, but they can give you about 50 hours. And now you have the opportunity to assess that talent in a low risk investment. So you don't have to bring them to New York so they can struggle with an unpaid internship. Let's create a micro internship where they get experience. They have something finally to put on their resume. They're building their network. You're finding out if this is someone who can fit in your culture. They're finding out, is this really what I want to do? Because everybody don't want to be a GM. Everybody want to be an agent, but we need some other people out here. So let's get them some experience with some other things, again, in projects and not this long-term internship. And really start, and I love what Vince talked about, if the last 10 people you hired all look the same, start doing some things differently. Come on over here to the Winning Edge. We provide fantastic opportunities for people to engage in a turnkey way. The babies, they don't like LinkedIn, but we're working on that. In the interim, we have created a platform where industry professionals can come in and say, hey, I can talk about these topics and I'm available at these times. And our game changers, which are minority student athletes, can go in and say, hey, I'm looking to speak to someone about these topics. And you give 30 minutes of your time. You don't have to build a school in Africa to make a difference. You can get signed off on some permits and get a construction crew. So come on over here and give us this permit, give us 30 minutes of your time. It can really make a difference. So that's my selfless, but if I get smacked on the hand for that, that's okay. I'll survive. But I wanted to make sure that those on the call today know that there are organizations doing some of this work already. You don't have to be the savior all the time. Support those organizations that are already doing it. So I appreciate everyone's time. I hope this conversation was as valuable to you as it was to me. Vince dropping the link that blew everybody's mind. Talk about $16 billion per company. I'm like, dang, people need to step it up. But that's what we're about. Thank you to this coalition for, again, creating this platform. And we are now going to provide our time to answer any of your questions in breakout rooms. I'm going to let somebody come on and explain that because I don't remember none of those instructions. But I'm going to sit here quietly and do as I'm told.
No, thank you guys so much. That was fantastic. Again, just as Karine said, we want to give you guys a chance to ask questions in breakouts. So we are going to send you all to breakouts right now. There'll be 2 speakers in each, and we'll rotate after about 7 minutes or so. So questions, try and keep them short-winded questions to really get to the point. And don't worry, you don't have to move. The speakers will move. So again, speakers, after 7 minutes, we'll send a note. And you guys can just leave the room and we'll switch it to the next one. Kelsey will be here waiting for you to move you to the next room. So everyone,
before you do that, I gotta drop my website in here.
Yes, drop in the links in the chat beforehand, definitely. And
we'll check us out. We on the gram too. We everywhere. Come check us out.
Yes. And then again, everybody, thank you so much. We'll come back to the main session after everyone just to say quick thank yous, but enjoy the breakouts. Make sure you turn your cameras on so people can see you as you ask your questions. Enjoy. Kelsey, go ahead and open us up.